decided to follow Jesus.
You know, in the Gospels, we frequently find Jesus reaching out to children, speaking about children, and calling them to his side. And his interest in children and his discussion of children is not because they're pure and they're innocent. It was because they're the most vulnerable in that society. Children in the time of Jesus were powerless and without economic resources. If you read all of the Gospels, you'll find them described as hungry. You'll find them described as sick. You'll find them described as demon-possessed and even dead. The status of children in our American society has simultaneously changed much and little from the time of Jesus. And it's no great surprise that this change or lack of change has largely been based on the circumstances into which a child is born. While there are many children that have access to good education, they have health care, they have a stable family life and safe neighborhoods, there are many other children who do not. Children who are powerless and vulnerable strictly because of the circumstances into which they are born. Circumstances such as poverty, an unstable family life, dangerous living conditions and dangerous neighborhoods, and lack of health care. The reality of our society is like that in the time of Jesus. There are still children who are vulnerable and powerless and without resources. And as the hands and the feet of God, we are called to help them when their families and when their communities either cannot or do not. Some time ago during the sermon, I read a letter from a little girl named Sarah. You may remember it because at the conclusion what I told you was that Sarah was not a single person, but rather a compilation of children that I had met. Today we revisit Sarah's letter, and we're going to see some more information about that, because you see Sarah lives across the street in Broadway Park. Does it work now?
Yes. It's on the top.
Oh. Okay. My name is Sarah, and I'm 10 years old. I live with my mom and my 8-year-old sister, Anna. We live in a house. We've lived here about 2 months. It's not our house, it's one of Mom's friends. We've lived a lot of different places. I was just beginning to make friends and learn my way around, and it's time to move again. Because we move a lot, we don't keep too many things. My sister and I sleep on an air mattress at night. Anna and I each have our own suitcase where we keep all of our toys and clothes. Many of the other things we move from place to place in garbage bags. I'm in the 4th grade. I should be in the 5th grade, but I was held back. I don't like to talk about that. It makes me feel ashamed. I do my best in school, but I don't seem to make good grades no matter how hard I try. Mama usually gets home late from work in the evening, and she doesn't have time to help me with my homework. I like school, but the building is kind of old. Sometimes it's really hot inside, and sometimes it's really cold. There always seems to be more kids than computers. I started this new school when we moved to this house. It's hard to go to a new school. New teachers, new kids, new rules to try to understand. The longest I've ever been anywhere was 1 whole school year, and that was when I was in the 2nd grade. The Homeless Alliance of Oklahoma City reports that in the last 5 years, families with children have been the fastest growing demographic of Oklahoma City's homeless population. They often become homeless because of a crisis in their family, a health crisis, a job crisis, a housing crisis, or some other type of financial crisis. And they come into our shelter system, or they couch surf, like Sarah, with friends and relatives. Children moving around so much during the school year makes the learning environment much more difficult. Many of the schools in Oklahoma City public schools have a student mobility rate of more than 50%. That means that more than 50% of the children will move in and out of the school in a single year. One elementary school principal told me that that was the greatest challenge of her elementary school. New kids, new rules, new learning environment, that makes it difficult on everybody. Now, I know there's been a lot of press lately about test results on standardized tests. And while I'm not suggesting that money buys a quality school system, I think it is a very important component. And I want you to consider this. Oklahoma ranks 48th in per pupil spending. Only Utah and Idaho spend less. So seriously, what does this say about the importance of children in our community? Sarah's letter continues. One thing I really like about going to school is eating. I love to eat. Every school day I get to eat breakfast and lunch. I really chow down on Fridays because with Mama's work, she's gone a lot on the weekends, and sometimes there's not much to eat in our house. My school gives me and Anna a backpack of food to eat each weekend, but some schools I've been to don't. I really hate school breaks and summertime because I'm often hungry. Our little church sits about square in the middle of the 73114 zip code. It goes about a mile to the north of us, a mile to the south of us, and 2 miles to the east and the west. In our little zip code right here, there are about 17,500 people within 2 miles of our very door. And of those 17,500 people, about 34% of them live below the federal poverty line. To put a perspective on how low the federal poverty line is, for a family of 3, the federal poverty line is $19,800. If you look more closely at that demographic, what you will find is of that number, 3,200 of those within 2 miles of here are children. So within 2 miles of where we sit at this very moment, there are more than 3,200 children living in households that make less than the federal poverty line. Now, many of you may be familiar with the Oklahoma Regional Food Bank's Backpack for Kids program, which is a great program. Kids that are identified by their schools as in need take every weekend a backpack of shelf-stable food home to eat. They can open it and fix it themselves. North Highland Elementary, where all the kids in this area go to school, they are a backpack school. But many of the schools in the Oklahoma City district and around the state are not. Because, see, the money for all of that comes from people like you and me, congregations and private donors pay for the backpack programs in the schools. But these backpack programs, they only run during the school year. So if it's Christmas break, if it's summer break, there's nothing. Some schools have a federal program, and there's a few of them around, but by and large, there's a great need for hunger of kids in the school system. The other thing about the backpack program is it's only for elementary school children, which means all the kids in Centennial Middle School and high school over here, they don't have that option. Mama works hard at 2 jobs, so she's gone a lot. Lots of times I feel scared being in the house by myself with Anna, but Mama says there's no money for a babysitter. I miss my daddy. The last time I saw him, I was 7 years old. He's in prison. I don't know why. Mama said he did something wrong, so he had to go to prison. My brother John is there too. He's 19. When he was 17, he did something wrong. I don't know what he did. Mama doesn't like to talk about it. Oklahoma has the 4th highest incarceration rate of any state in the United States for general prison population, and it has the largest incarceration rate for women. Interestingly, while almost all of the states report a slow dipping in their prison populations, Oklahoma continues to report an increase. And a big part of this is because nearly half of the prisoners in prison are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses that are either property or drug related. And there is this issue of mandatory minimum sentences are a big part of the reason why. In the state of Oklahoma, we have 122 mandatory minimum prison sentences if you're convicted of a certain crime. So for example, if you're caught with a handful of Percocet that you don't have a prescription for, you will be sentenced to 2 years in prison. If you are caught with marijuana on more than 2 occasions, you will be there for 2 years as well. If you are convicted of a robbery and there's more than 2 of you, regardless of how much you took, you will be in prison for 5 years. Now, I'm not suggesting that there should not be a consequence for a crime. I'm not suggesting that at all. But what I am saying is that the Oklahoma Policy Institute says that mandatory minimum sentences have shown to be ineffective. I repeat that, ineffective at preventing crime. And Oklahoma lags far behind alternative sentencing programs that are in place in other states, such as drug treatment, rehabilitation, and education, all of which have produced a decline in prison populations and dramatically reduced the rate of reoffending. I'd love to have a bike, but since we move around so much, there's no room for a bike. We don't have a car either. Sometimes we can get a ride with someone, but usually we take the bus. I hate the bus. It's so cold inside and it takes forever to get anywhere. And there's just lots of places that the bus doesn't go. Mama tries to take us to food pantries for groceries, to doctor's appointments, and to the library, but it's hard to get there on the bus, and it means Mama must take off work and not get paid. At least Anna and I can go to the doctor if we're sick. There's no money for Mama to go to the doctor if she gets sick. It worries me what will happen if Mama gets sick. Somebody tell me where the nearest bus stop is to where we sit right now. That's right. Hefner and Western, 1.5 miles from here, is the closest bus stop to this location. And if you're at that bus stop, you will see there is a single wooden bench that is unsheltered. There's no information about the route number or the times or anything. It's just a simple wooden bench that says bus stops. So if it's cold or rainy or hot or whatever, you're just stuck. Many passengers, if you want to go on the bus, what you have to do is you have to get on somewhere way out here like this, and then you have to go all the way down to a central hub, and then you can go out. So typically it takes someplace, that would be a pretty fast trip by car, much longer to get there on the bus because you've got to do all of these changes. And there's frankly just a lot of places that our bus system doesn't go. One of the reasons it makes it so difficult to use is the service stops around 7:30 in the evening. And there's no service at all on Sundays. One of the things I wanted to mention is repeated studies have shown that there is not anywhere in the United States where someone can live on minimum wage. The current minimum wage is $7.25. A recent study says that even in the very cheapest area, It would take at least $10.20 an hour for a U.S. worker to achieve some sort of economic stability. The Economic Policy Institute says that for a family of 3 to survive and cover their basic needs in the county with the lowest cost of living in the United States for a family for 3, it would take about $45,000 a year for housing, clothing, food, health insurance, the whole thing. You take a single mother making minimum wage with 2 kids, and she will gross about $15,000 a year. Medical coverage is still out of reach for many adults living in poverty. While children in Oklahoma are covered by Medicaid, also known as Sooner Care, that coverage ends when they turn 18. Now, hypothetically, they could get coverage through the Affordable Care Act that went into effect this year, but here's the kicker about that. Because they live below the 400% of the federal poverty line, they're not eligible for any tax credits, which means they have to pay the full amount of their premium. The system was never designed for that. And so if you're between the ages of 18 to 64, your only option is to pay your full premium, and you may get a decent rate on the health care exchange, or you may not, depending on what your pre-existing conditions are. Oops, anyway. I feel luckier than some kids I know. My mama loves me and tells me so often. Not all kids are so lucky to have a good mama. A friend from school is a foster kid. He lives with foster families because his mama and his daddy didn't treat him right. He doesn't like to talk about it. He's lived with foster families since he was 7, and he currently lives with his 5th foster family. He says it's hard to change families all the time. Some of the families he has liked and wanted to stay there, others not so much. In Oklahoma, 10 out of every 1,000 children are in foster care. That means 1 out of every 100 children you meet, one of those children is in foster care. That is a mind-blowing statistic to me. Absolutely mind-blowing. If you look around at the states around us, Oklahoma's had, around Oklahoma, New Mexico, 4 out of every 100 children are in foster care. Texas, 5 out of every 100. No, actually, Arkansas is 5 out of every 1,000, and Texas is 4 out of every 1,000. That means Oklahoma has more than twice the number of children in foster care for every 1,000 than the states around us do. That is a mind-blowing statistic to me. These are the realities of the children, many of the children that live within 2 miles of where we sit today. These are the challenges that they got up with this morning, and these are the challenges that they will got up and live with tomorrow morning. You know, Jesus was deadly serious about helping marginalized children in the gospel. And as Jesus' hands and feet in the world, let us be serious too. I really like going to church. Whenever Mama is not going, we go. It's fun and the people are nice, and there's usually good things to eat. When I get to go to church, I like learning things about Jesus. One of my favorite stories is the Good Samaritan. Now, I'm not sure who a Levite is, but I have some idea of who priests are. And I'm not sure why Samaritans are even called Samaritans. The reason I like the story of the Good Samaritan is that it's about going out of your way to make someone else's life better when you don't have to, while others just walk by and turn away. Ever since I heard this story, I've been asking God to send a Good Samaritan to help me, Mama, and Anna. In the name of the Father, and the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I have decided to follow Jesus.